The first question. Dear Ajahn, when my mind becomes peaceful, I sometimes hear what seems like voices or repeated words. I used to think it was a teacher talking to me, but now I know it's just my mind. It still hooks on me sometimes for quite a while. Is there anything I can do?
Well, this is not an uncommon experience. Others have it too. Number one is always try to establish mindfulness, awareness of what's going on. And so using meditation objects such as the breath, but not only the breath, to focus your mind, even as you hear voices, as you say, these are coming from your own mind. So the important thing is just to know them as what we call sankharas, just sounds, voices, thoughts, thought formations coming up. And you can know them as impermanent because they are impermanent. They arise, they cease, they change. And when you see something as impermanent, you don't take it too seriously. You don't give it too much importance because it's just a passing thought or a sound, the sound of a voice. Really, that's what your aim is, just to have enough mindfulness to know that and let them go. Know that they're impermanent. They're not really you in the sense they're just passing thoughts or moods or sounds, and let them go. Don't believe them or give them too much importance. One of the problems when you're meditating is sometimes we get fascinated by different things that come up in the mind. So it could be sounds, voices, different things. Sometimes we're fascinated. Maybe it sounds like it's Dhamma or interesting Dhamma. Start analyzing it or thinking, what's this, what's that? Where's it come from? Who is it? There you tend to lose your mindfulness, don't you? Because of the fascination, the interest, the curiosity, you start just, we say, proliferating and believing too much, giving too much importance. So I would go the other way and just try and establish mindfulness and just observe them arising and ceasing and don't give them a lot of importance. Just like so many other experiences we have when we meditate, you feel air on your skin, hot or cold. You feel itches, aches and pains in your body. You have memories come up. You hear sounds. All of these different experiences you can just know as arising and ceasing, but you don't get too caught up in them or too attached or don't give too much importance to them. So that would be my encouragement to you, just to keep mindful, observe them and let them go.
Sadhu Lumpo. The next question. Are we stuck with our karma? Can we not deal with our karma in a positive way? For example, set an intent that we will endeavor to improve ourselves or be better than we have done in the past, instead of being stuck in a mindset that dwells in our past karma.
Yes, of course. I mean, that is the whole point of Buddhist practice, is that you're changing the way you look at yourself and the world and the way you do things. So, say, undertaking to keep precepts is changing karma, because you're saying, I will undertake not to kill, not to steal, not to cheat on my partner, not to tell a lie or abuse people through my speech, and not to take drink or drugs that intoxicate the mind. That's new karma, isn't it? If you haven't been doing that before, and then you decide to take on the precepts as a way of training yourself, that's new karma, and it will bring new, better results and improve your life for sure. Learning meditation is new good karma, because you're cultivating mindfulness and then wisdom through reflection. Maybe before you never practiced mindfulness consciously, you never listened to Dhamma, you never reflected on Dhamma. But if you're now doing it, now you're changing your karma for better. you're cultivating so many good qualities as you practice mindfulness and meditation. Practicing, as I've said tonight, patience, effort, bringing up faith, and then wise reflection. This is all good examples of good karma that you're developing, and this will help you to cope with the bad karma that may be ripening from time to time, such as pain and illness, confusion and mental suffering. Rather than indulging in the suffering and becoming more depressed, negative, more upset by it all, cultivating the good qualities will help you get through it. And quite often it helps you to get through the ripening bad karma more quickly and more painlessly, because you're not creating further suffering out of it. So like you say, yeah, seeing the good in a situation, focusing more in a positive way when you're facing difficult challenges, that is a good thing. Practicing mindfulness so that you're not falling into negative states of mind as you're experiencing bad karma, that would be a good thing. So say somebody is rude to you, insults you, argues with you, that you might say is a result of past karma coming up. So you now have these unpleasant words come into your ear in an unpleasant situation, perhaps. But establishing mindfulness, you say, I'm going to be restrained here. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to insult them back. I'm going to be patient with these unpleasant words I'm hearing. I'll reflect on them, whether they're true or not. So you can still maintain a positive, good state of mind, even when you're experiencing suffering. And you're learning this all the time in our practice, the practice of Dhamma.
Sadhu Lampo. Next question. Bhante, do thoughts arise as a function of the mind rather than due to karmic inheritance, just like the beating of our hearts or our breaths? Thanks.
Well, of course, if you're alive and you have a mind, you can think. Like you say, it's a function of mind. But how you think and what thoughts come up, well, that is karma, because they'll be determined by what's happened before and how you're affected by ignorance, which conditions craving, attachment, mental defilements. So say a Buddha or an Arahant can still think, but they're not attached to their thoughts, and their thoughts are not unwholesome. So they're not thinking with greed, anger, and delusion. They're not attaching to their thoughts as self, and therefore not suffering with thought. They're simply using thought as a tool, maybe to teach or help people in different ways, to spread the Dhamma, for example. Whereas the unenlightened mind is still affected by ignorance and craving, so greed, anger, delusion. So that will be conditioning thought, and thought becomes like the servant of the defilements. And so some of our thoughts are following greed and serving greed, as it were. So thoughts about how to get the things we want, or opinions about things that we like and wanting more and how to get more and planning how to get more, etc. Or the thoughts become the servant of aversion, how to get rid of what we don't like and get back at who we don't like, and all those kind of more negative thoughts based in aversion. So this is part of practice, recognizing how to use thought skillfully, recognizing the nature of the thought as impermanent, not self as well, but also learning how to use thought skillfully to help further promote the Dhamma and to reduce the effects of greed, anger, and delusion. So sometimes that simply means recognizing a thought is a thought rooted in greed or anger and delusion, and say, no, I'm not going to hold on to this. I'm going to let this go. I'm not going to keep it in my mind. And that, a lot of our practice is based around that, recognizing the kind of thoughts and mental states we're having and finding a skillful way to deal with them. But sometimes all you need to do is just be mindful, and then you'll see thoughts arise and pass away, and you don't need to do a lot with them at all if you're mindful. Other times you have to work harder and introduce maybe better thoughts. When you've got one set of thinking and affecting you, like you're angry, we're introducing something better like kindness or forgiveness, if that helps. So, there's a whole range of practices we're doing using the thinking mind. But our number one aim is always to bring up mindfulness so that we can pay attention and know what's happening in our mind, and then we can use wisdom to see what the right course of action is, what we need to do next.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. Appreciation for Achan's continued and tireless commitment for teaching. Most days I only get to sit, meditate only one session for about an hour. I try to do a few minutes of metta meditation and then change into the breath meditation. Is it acceptable to change the object in one sitting? I have heard that if done correctly, breath meditation also leads to improved metta. Could Achan please comment on this?
Well, what you're doing is very good. To sit meditation as a layperson for an hour a day is quite an achievement. So good on you. Keep it up. And if you're practicing for an hour, then I would say, yeah, it's quite a good way to practice is to devote some of that hour to the cultivation of metta, because it's a quality we always need in our life. And it will support the practice of the breath meditation, because we often go through our day, say, and we have incidents and circumstances that come up that may challenge our metta, take away our metta, put us in a bad mood, or put us under pressure, challenge us, and so on. So metta is a very skillful core quality to develop every day, at least for a short period of time, I would say. And it will support your meditation. If you're doing the breath meditation, it's a very good introduction. You cultivate goodwill first for yourself, for others, and then move on to the breath, which is a very subtle, refined sensation and meditation. And maybe at first the metta is something more tangible to you. Maybe it is a good way to start your meditation period. Once you are developing the breath and you're calm and you're developing more mindfulness with the breath, well, you're right. You'll be overcoming all 5 hindrances. And one of the hindrances is ill will, payabada. So as you develop breath meditation, you naturally will be developing mindfulness too, and metta, goodwill too. So if you've been meditating a lot, you're more skilled, more experienced in it, maybe you can go straight to the breath meditation and it will do the job of bringing up metta at the same time. But in the beginning, I would sometimes devote a specific period of time to the metta meditation, because I think most people need that. It's a helpful quality for their practice. But as you said, any meditation object will result in the subduing the 5 hindrances and maybe even abandoning them for periods of time. And that means there'll be no ill will in the mind. So even if you're contemplating the body or contemplating death or seeing yourself as a corpse, all these sort of more unusual meditations on the body that don't seem immediately to do with kindness and compassion, but because they help you overcome the hindrances, they also bring up metta. And myself, I've experienced that, and then many monks I know also. They can sit there dwelling on a meditation, seeing themselves as a corpse, seeing themselves as a dead body, as bones or whatever, and they become more and more peaceful and more pleasant to be around when it's working well, and they become full of metta. So it's just something to bear in mind, isn't it? Anytime you're fully mindful and you have a state of samadhi, you will also have metta. It's not separate, but developing metta in itself as an object of mind, especially helpful for beginners and newcomers, I'd say, and sometimes for the experienced meditator as well. You may have a specific need for metta, in the sense there may be a person who's suffering and you spread metta to them because they're suffering and you want to help them or need to help them. Or you're in a situation where, could be, say, for monks, sometimes you're out in the forest and there's a wild animal there or something, so you spread metta. So there will be times when you use metta, even if you're an experienced long-term meditator, as it were. And there'll be times when you don't need to specifically develop metta, but because your mind is peaceful or developing mindfulness with an object, metta comes quite naturally. So through experience, you get to see what's needed from time to time in your practice and what's appropriate.
Sadhu Lumpo. Next question. Dear Ajahn, I have had inappropriate violent thoughts to kill my mother. I believe it is past karma that I have committed killing such that anger impressions on the mind in such violent ways. Upon having such thoughts, I immediately seek forgiveness from the Triple Gem and recommit to adhering strictly to the precepts. May I know what is the karma of having such thoughts? Thank you, Ajahn.
Well, I'd say most people get irritated or angry with their parents from time to time, especially as we're growing up. So that is not so strange. But if it's recurring and they're particularly violent thoughts, more extreme, well, that is something you have to be very mindful of, and you are, because you're bringing it up as a question. So you've already realized there's something you have to deal with there. So aversion to anyone that might lead to violent thoughts, requires a lot of forgiveness, acceptance, forgiveness, recognizing that when you forgive, you're benefiting more than the person you're forgiving. Because often, what triggers your violent thoughts may be feelings of injustice, or my mum doesn't love me enough, or she's unfair, or she's been unkind to me, or hasn't done her job properly, or has different views from me. So many things may trigger frustration with parents. You have to see you're suffering with these violent thoughts. It's your anger, it's your responsibility. And so forgiveness, acceptance of the person, forgiveness of the person is healing you more than it's helping them. So it's not, like sometimes people are reluctant to forgive someone because they say, well, they've done all these bad things and I don't feel they deserve to be forgiven. But the forgiveness is healing yourself, because you're not dwelling on your anger, you're letting it go. And of course, trying maybe to gently bring yourself to recognize the good in your parents, your mother. She gave birth to you. That wasn't a small thing, 9 months in the womb. And then I don't know your story, but I assume she brought you up, fed you, clothed you, looked after you, gave you love, and so on. That's an amazing thing she's done. So even if you don't like her personality or her views or her character, or even if you've seen her faults and mistakes because you live with her, that doesn't take away the amazing thing she's done for you. She's given you the gift of life. So that's what you have to also focus on, the good of your mother. And then, of course, in the same way, the harm that comes when you have these negative thoughts, or hold on to the negative thoughts towards your mother, the wish to harm her, is going in away from the direction of the Dhamma, away from the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, away from all that is good and wise in the world. So they're not thoughts to be entertained. So if they come up, that's understandable. Sometimes when we're frustrated, we have negative thoughts. The important thing is to establish your plan. How are you going to treat these thoughts? What are you going to do with them? And The important thing is to see what they're to be abandoned, let go of, through kindness, forgiveness, tolerance. It doesn't mean to say you have to like your mother even, just don't wish to harm her. And practice that until you can be normal with your mum and just think normally of her and forgive her and be patient with her. So yes, perhaps these are thoughts that you've had for many lifetimes, and so this is the time to finally give them up, change the direction of your karma. So we can think negative thoughts, and especially these days, with so much visual media showing us killing and violence in movies and online games and the news even, that it's no excuse, but it's kind of just one other factor that stimulates it. When we are angry with someone, we often have violent thoughts because we've seen them elsewhere, seen violent visual images elsewhere. So we have to work harder to be mindful, let them go. And of course, establish yourself in the practice of 5 precepts, so you're never going to physically harm anyone. So even if the thought does come up, you're not going to act on it. And that's the establishment of sila, or precepts in your mind. The crazy thought, the wild thought, the angry thought comes out, but you will not act on it. And when you don't act on something, it withers away over time because you're not feeding it, you're not nourishing it. So if you keep not acting on a violent thought, after a while it's not going to come up, is it? It loses importance in your mind. So you have to be patient enough and work at it enough to the point where those thoughts just don't come up anymore. They're finished. That's your goal.
Sadhu Lumpur. The next question. Dear Ajahn, what is wise reflection? Do we do it whilst meditating or after the meditation?
Both. But not all the time in meditation. It's something you do from time to time in meditation. It's the opposite of unwise reflection, unwise attention. So you're attending to what's going on wisely with wisdom. And where does wisdom come from? Well, it comes firstly from the word of the Buddha and teachers, and secondly from your own training, your own mind to look at things and consider things wisely. Wisdom in Buddhism is always directed to reducing and ending suffering. So, for example, say you have an angry thought, like the last question, you have someone in your life that makes you angry. You think of them or you're with them and anger arises. You start having angry emotional states, you're thinking with anger. Unwise attention means you keep thinking of what makes you angry, this person, what they said, what they did, what it is that you don't like that makes you angry. You keep thinking of it. That's giving unwise attention, where you're feeding the cause of the suffering, and your suffering continues, which is not good. Or you can give wise attention to that situation and say, well, this person, I'm angry with them, but that's not good because I'm suffering. It's not good for my relationship with them. It may lead me to do something destructive or hurtful. So this is an example of giving wise reflection to this problem of being angry, and then you're looking at how to change the direction of your mind to be more mindful, obviously, and then also to think more skillfully about this problem so that you can abandon the anger or change the way you're thinking in this situation. So wise attention is supported by mindfulness, but it's not exactly the same thing. And sometimes in meditation, you need to develop wise attention because you have a problem that keeps obstructing you. So you need to think it through and give it some consideration and see what you can do to let go of this problem or understand it better. And then sometimes we use wise reflection at other times in our life when we have a problem in our daily life, at work or in the family or whatever. You've always got choices whether to attend to something wisely or unwisely. So, you might say you get the news that you're ill or you have some physical ailment. unwise attention might be going into a mood of depression or getting upset or panicking or fear, anxiety, and just dwelling on it with worry, what's going to happen, thinking about the future, thinking about this and that in a very unwise way, which only makes the suffering of your bad news worse. Or you may try to introduce the Dhamma and give some wise reflection to this new problem you're facing of illness or injury, and you say, well, this is the nature of the body, it's impermanent, but it's not the end of the world. I can still use my mind to practice the Dhamma and reflect on Dhamma, and I can still do things, and whatever helps you to deal with and understand that particular situation better, so that you're not suffering in it or you're not creating suffering out of it. That would be wise reflection. So you use it regularly in your life, both when you're meditating and not, but not all the time. Obviously in meditation, sometimes you're just developing mindfulness, and you can use a bit of wise reflection to understand things, put you in the right attitude and set you on your way. And then other times you're just working with mindfulness on an object and really being very determined, and you hardly need to do much wise reflection at all. So there's no one simple answer here. It depends on the circumstances, what's going on in your meditation, how much wise reflection you use or how little you use.
Sadhu Lumpo. The next question. Many thanks for the Dhamma talk, Sadhu. May I know what is your explanation on this phrase that I have heard from the Dhamma talk, still flowing water? Quote, one should be careful and not be drunken by the Dhamma, unquote. What does drunken Dhamma mean? From my understanding, it means one is trying to preach the Dhamma to whoever is coming their way. I am concerned as I see my attachment in learning and listening to a Dhamma talk. How can one stop oneself from being too attached in the Dhamma? Thanks for your guidance.
Yeah, well, you seem to understand the problem quite well. We can get drunk on the Dhamma. Dhamma gives us information that we can remember. It can be inspiring, and that brings up joy, rapture, happiness, energy, which sometimes is misdirected, isn't it? With these particularly with rapture, you get a lot of joy, so you're kind of what's the word, ebullient. There's an outflow of joy from the Dhamma, having heard Dhamma or even just practiced Dhamma for yourself. And then you want to tell everyone about it, how good it is. So it seems like a good thing, a wholesome thing. But of course, if you're not skilled yet as a teacher or fully skilled in your understanding of the Dhamma that you've heard or realized, you can become intoxicated with that, and you're just telling everyone about how good Buddhism is, how good the Dhamma is, without maybe reflecting on those people who are listening, whether they're ready to listen or they appreciate what you're saying or understand what you're saying or agree with what you're saying. So, for example, monks, we have a rule: we can't teach people unless we're invited to. So we can't just walk up to somebody on the street and tell them how good the Dhamma is. If they ask us a question or invite us to go and give a Dhamma talk or teach meditation, well, we may consider that we're going to do that, but we can't just impose ourselves on others. And you notice some people become very inspired with the Dhamma, but then they want to teach. And this wanting to teach is a subtle defilement, isn't it? It's not because they're enlightened or really know necessarily. It's because they want to teach. Maybe there's a certain sense of self involved with that. They want to impress others. They want to help others as well. But it's coming from their own need rather than the need of the other person. So I need to teach, so I need to tell everyone about the Dhamma. It can be like that. So again, we have to reflect on this. You know, what's going on. If you find yourself always telling people about how good the Dhamma is, you know, try and notice what's happening. Are they listening? Are they yawning and sort of going, "Oh, here's that guy again," or rolling their eyes? Here's the person drunk on the Dhamma. You know, try and be more mindful and see whether what you're saying or the situation you're in is really appropriate or helpful, or maybe it's actually making things worse or putting people off. Maybe they, you know, you come into a room and if everyone scatters, maybe that's a sign you're drunk on the Dhamma. Everyone scatters and you've got no one left to talk to, so you just start talking to the trees. For a monk, that may be the case. In my life, there's been one or two monks who have ended up just telling the trees the Dhamma because no one will listen to them. In the show, you know, in the end, we're looking at suffering and the end of suffering. So if you're drunk on the Dhamma, then there'll be some suffering there, won't there? There'll be suffering if people are not listening to you. There'll be the frustration when there's no one to talk to. There'll be, it's almost like, you know, you've got an energy bottled up that you have to get out because you're suffering, and it creates suffering as well. So that's what you have to investigate. We're not here to increase our suffering. We're here to reduce suffering and end suffering. So maybe that's one way you can reflect on it. Also, another thing, when you're drunk on the Dhamma, sometimes you end up in arguments, don't you? So, which is a shame, because the Dhamma is not for creating arguments, conflict between people. It's for helping people understand and be more at peace. So if you're not skilled in teaching the Dhamma, you're just telling people, but without much filter going, you know, you're not filtering what you say or thinking of time and place, then it can lead to an argument. Maybe you have some understanding of your understanding of the Dhamma, someone disagrees or has another view, and then you end up arguing, which is a shame. So there's these different aspects which are like telling you maybe you're drunk on the Dhamma. If you're arguing a lot, you're talking too much, or you're pushing people away, these are things you have to reflect on.
Sadhu Lompo. Next question. Achan, I'm curious about my husband's perspective on our son pursuing his medical degree. He believes it might lead to a busier life and possibly steer him away from Dhamma. How can I better understand his concerns and navigate this situation?
Talk to him. If you have different views on something, well, try to communicate skillfully, listen, talk, and come to whatever understanding you can. Whether somebody is close to the Dhamma or far is not necessarily because of their career choice or their study choice. You know, it's many things, and some people have a lot of faith in Dhamma, but then their relatives or family members don't have so much faith in the Dhamma, and sometimes you just have to accept that. You do your best to encourage, if you have faith in the Dhamma, you do your best to encourage others to practice to the Dhamma, listen to the Dhamma, bring them to meet teachers and so on. But you can't force it, can you? You can't force someone to have interest in Dhamma. As far as their career choice, was it the son wants to study medicine? You know, medicine is a good career. Many doctors, people involved with medicine and healthcare have an interest in Dhamma as well, and then some don't. And I'm not sure that's because they're doctors or not. You know, there's many factors at work here. One of the best ways for a parent to inspire their kids to be interested in Dhamma is to practice the Dhamma yourself. Put it into practice. Keep the precepts, meditate, try to control your temper, keep, practice restraint, mindfulness in daily life, be a good example. At the very least, they will see that. They may follow, they may not, but at the very least, they see a good example. So sometimes the best lessons are just through your own practice, being there, practicing. You may not always be able to impose or push it onto another person. That may not work. Sometimes it can, but quite often you push it onto someone else, it actually pushes the person away. You have to be careful of that. So practice for yourself first, get that really established, so that you can use your mindfulness and your wisdom and understanding to talk to those around you in a good way, a successful way, with mindfulness, with wisdom, without just forcing them or pushing your emotions onto them. Sometimes we have to be equanimous with other people. We want the best for them, but they're not listening or they're not following our advice. Sometimes you have to accept that equanimously. Maybe they're just not ready sometimes. So you see what you can do, but you also have to accept everyone's karma, their personality is different. So some people you can help and some you can't.
Sadhu Lumpo. Does anyone else have any further questions or comments? Lumpo, there are no further questions.
Okay, well, very nice talking to you all tonight, and we wish you well in your Dhamma practice, and may the blessings of Buddha Dhamma Sangha be with you until next time.